The text came through at 4:07 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I know the exact time because I was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, reading a message from my ex-wife about picking up our daughter on Thursday. The screen flickered once, a hard white flash that I thought was a glitch, and then the notification appeared. No sender, no number, just a gray box with black text. Containment Protocol 7. A active, shelter directive issued for all residents of Franklin County. Do not travel. Do not congregate. Await further instruction. This is not a test. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds. Then I locked the phone and set it on the nightstand and told myself it was spam. Some kind of phishing thing, maybe a prank running through a spoofed alert system. I'd seen stories about that kids hacking into emergency broadcast chains for laughs. I lay back down and pulled the sheet to my chest and listened to the house settle. Then my phone buzzed again. Same message, word for word. I sat up, walked to the window. The street outside was quiet, the usual nothing of 4 a.m. in a mid-sized city. Porch lights, one street lamp buzzing orange near the corner. Mrs. Delaney's cat sitting on the hood of her Civic like it owned the block. I opened my phone again and checked Twitter. Nothing. Checked the local news app. The last update was a story about a water main break on Prescott Avenue from the previous afternoon. I typed the phrase Containment Protocol 7A into Google and got 0 relevant results. Not a single hit. That should have been my first real warning. Not the message itself, but the silence around it. By 4:30, I'd made coffee. By 4:45, I'd called my brother Danny. He picked up on the 6th ring, his voice like gravel dropped into a bucket. You get it? I said. Get what? The text. There was a pause, then the sound of him fumbling for his phone. I heard the click of the screen. A beat. Then, what the hell is this? I don't know. That's why I'm calling. Danny lived 11 minutes away, on the east end of Garfield Street, in a duplex he'd been renting since his second divorce. He was 44, 6 years older than me, and he had the survival instincts of a man who'd spent 20 years in commercial roofing, which is to say, he trusted nothing and prepared for everything. You check the news? He asked. Nothing. FEMA site? Nothing. That's not right, Danny said. If they pushed a real alert, there'd be a source. There'd be a signature, some kind of government header. I know. So it's fake. Probably. Neither of us hung up. Danny cleared his throat. Mira get it too? Mira was our younger sister. She lived across town near the university where she taught adjunct biology courses and quietly resented everything about her career. I'm not calling her at 4 in the morning, I said. I'll call her. Danny. She's got Luca, he said. Luca was her son, 5 years old. If something's off, she should know. He hung up before I could argue. I stood in the kitchen and drank my coffee and watched the sky begin its slow, reluctant shift from black to bruised blue. The neighborhood was still. I told myself that the stillness was ordinary, that it was just early, that everything was exactly as it always was. But the phone sat on the counter, screen down, and I didn't touch it again for almost an hour. When I finally flipped it over, there were 47 new posts in the Franklin County Neighborhood Group on Facebook. Every one of them was asking the same question. Did anyone else get that text? Every single person had received it, every phone, at 4:07 a.m. By 8 a.m., the city was pretending it didn't matter. That's what people do. I know that now they don't ignore warnings so much as metabolize them into something manageable. The text became a talking point, a curiosity, something to mention in line at the gas station with a half laugh and a shake of the head. I went to work. I managed inventory for a regional building supply company called Hargrove and Sons, which meant I spent most of my day in a warehouse on the south side, counting pallets and reconciling shipment logs. It was honest, unremarkable work, and I liked the quiet of it. The warehouse was a massive corrugated shell that smelled like sawdust and plastic wrap. And on most days, the only voices I heard belonged to the forklift drivers and the delivery guys who came through before noon. That morning, though, everyone was talking. "Government test," said Ray Castillo, who drove the morning route. He was leaning against the loading dock with a styrofoam cup, his uniform shirt already dark at the armpits. "They do this. Send out a mass alert to see how the system responds. Happened in Hawaii a few years back." "The Hawaii thing was a missile alert," I said. "They corrected it in 38 minutes. Nobody's corrected this." "Because there's nothing to correct. It's a drill. Drills have follow-ups." Ray shrugged and drained his coffee and went to start his truck, and I watched him pull out of the lot like it was any other morning. Maybe it was. Maybe I was the one overreading a glitch. At lunch, I sat in my office, a glorified closet with a metal desk and a window that overlooked the yard, and called Danny again. He picked up immediately. "Mira's pissed," he said. "At us?" "At the text. She thinks it's a cyber attack, some kind of mass phishing thing designed to cause panic." "Is she panicking?" "She's Mira. She's making a spreadsheet." That sounded right. Mira processed fear through organization. When our mother died, Mira had the funeral planned, the estate mapped, and the house listed within 9 days. She didn't grieve so much as project manage it. "She took Luca to school?" I asked. "Yeah. Schools are open. Everything's open. City put out a statement around 7, said the message didn't originate from any municipal or federal system, and they're investigating." "Investigating what?" "That's the whole statement, Nate. That's all they said." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. A fluorescent tube was buzzing overhead. Outside, a pallet of drywall was being unloaded from a flatbed, and the forklift was beeping its slow, mechanical heartbeat. "You do anything?" I asked. Danny paused. I knew what that pause meant. Danny had a storage unit on Route 9 that he didn't talk about much. I'd seen inside it once shelves of canned food, water jugs, batteries, a hand-crank radio, medical supplies, and 2 rifles he'd bought legally but stored quietly. He wasn't a prepper in any ideological sense. He just didn't trust infrastructure. "I moved some stuff to the house," he said carefully. "Just in case." "Just in case of what?" "In case it wasn't spam, Nate." The rest of the day passed like a held breath. Nothing happened. The city operated. Traffic flowed. People went to restaurants, picked up groceries, collected their kids. By evening, the Facebook group had mostly moved on to arguing about a proposed bike lane on 4th Street. But that night, around 10 p.m., I was brushing my teeth when I heard a sound outside. A low, staggered kind of moan, wet and guttural, that I first attributed to a stray animal. I went to the bathroom window and looked down at the alley behind my house. A man was standing under the fire escape of the apartment building next door. He was barefoot, wearing hospital scrub pants and nothing else. And he was swaying. Not drunk swaying, something else. His arms hung at his sides, and his head was tilted at an angle that didn't look voluntary, like a puppet whose string had snagged. I watched him for about 30 seconds. He didn't move, didn't look up, didn't seem aware of anything at all. Then he turned, not smoothly, but in a jerking, mechanical rotation, and walked into the dark end of the alley, and none was gone. I locked the back door, checked the front, went to bed with the lights on, and didn't sleep until almost 3 a.m. 71 hours left. I didn't know it yet. Wednesday morning, the second text arrived. Same format, same gray box, same absence of a sender. This one was shorter. Phase 2 initiated. Avoid physical contact with symptomatic individuals. Symptoms include disorientation, involuntary movement, vocal distortion. Seek shelter, secure entry points. This is not a test. This time, I didn't wait. I called Danny before I was out of bed. Got it, he said. He sounded different. Not scared exactly, but compressed. Like a man speaking from inside a tightening space. Mira got it. Everyone got it. What does symptomatic mean? Could mean anything. Could be a bioterror thing. Could be chemical. Danny. I don't know, Nate. I'm telling you what I don't know, which is everything. The news was moving now. Local stations had picked up the story. A morning anchor on Channel 4 spent 2 minutes reading both texts aloud with the performative calm of a man defusing a bomb with an audience. Then cut to a city spokesperson who said the messages were under investigation and that there was no confirmed public health threat at this time. The spokesperson blinked too much. I noticed that. I drove to work through streets that felt different. Not empty, not yet, but watchful. People were walking faster. Fewer were on the sidewalks. A woman outside the pharmacy on Elm Street was loading cases of water so into her trunk. And she wasn't alone. There were 4 others in the lot doing the same thing. At the warehouse, Ray didn't show up. His route went undriven. No one called it in. I tried his phone twice. No answer. By midday, something had shifted in the air itself. I don't mean that metaphorically. The barometric pressure felt wrong, heavy, and tight, like the hour before a storm that doesn't come. I stood in the warehouse doorway and looked out at the road and counted cars. In a normal hour, 60 to 70 vehicles passed the lot. That hour, I counted 19. At 1:15 p.m., I got a call from Mira. "I'm picking up Luca early," she said. Her voice had that particular Mira quality, clipped, precise, already 3 steps ahead. The school hasn't said anything, but 2 kids in his class went home this morning. One of them was carried out by his father, and the kid was making sounds that the teacher described as, and I'm quoting, unusual vocalizations. What does that mean? It means I'm picking up my son, Nate. I'll meet you at your place. Bring Danny. She hung up. I closed the warehouse early. My boss, Frank Hargrove, wasn't in. Hadn't been in since Monday, actually. I locked the gates and drove east through streets that were beginning to feel like the set of something too still, too arranged, too quiet for a Wednesday afternoon. I picked up Danny on the way. He came out of his duplex carrying a duffel bag and a large plastic bin. He put the bin in my trunk without explanation, and when he got in the passenger seat, he smelled like gun oil and spearmint gum. "What's in the bin?" I asked. "Things we might want." "Danny, drive Nate." Mira's house was a narrow 2-story near the edge of campus, with a small fenced yard and a detached garage she used for storage. When we arrived, she was already inside with Luca. The boy was on the living room floor with a coloring book, humming to himself. He looked up when we walked in. "Uncle Nate," he said. "Uncle Danny brought a big box." "He sure did, buddy." Mira was at the kitchen table with her laptop open and 3 browser tabs visible. One was the CDC homepage. One was a Reddit thread. One was a live police scanner feed for Franklin County. Sit down, she said. We sat. The Reddit thread is from a user in Garland, Texas, she said, turning the laptop toward us. Posted 9 hours ago. They received the same texts, exact same wording, same timing. Garland, Houston, Tampa, Portland, Omaha. It's not local, it's national. Danny leaned forward. Federal alert system? No, that's the thing. FEMA hasn't issued anything. Neither is DHS. Neither has the CDC. Whatever's pushing these messages, it's not using any known government channel. And nobody can trace the source. The police scanner crackled. A dispatcher's voice, steady and professional, requested units to respond to a disturbance at a residential address on Millbrook Lane. The description used the words, individual exhibiting erratic physical behavior, possible seizure, not responsive to verbal commands. We listened. Luca kept coloring. That's the fourth one in 2 hours, Mira said quietly. Thursday began with sirens. Not the distant, occasional kind, the kind you absorb into background noise while pouring cereal. These were layered and relentless, overlapping like threads being pulled from different parts of the city at once. I'd slept on Mira's couch with my shoes on. Danny had taken the recliner and hadn't slept at all. I knew because every time I opened my eyes during the night, I could see the blue glow of his phone illuminating his face. By 6 a.m., Mira had already been up for an hour. She'd made oatmeal for Luca and taped a large city map to the kitchen wall. Red dots marked the locations of every police scanner call she'd logged overnight. There were over 30. They're clustered, she said, pointing to a dense grouping near the northeastern quadrant. Hospital district, senior care facilities, homeless shelters, anywhere with high-density populations and limited mobility. What are we actually looking at here? I asked. I needed someone to say it out loud. Danny said it. Infection. The word sat in the kitchen like a stone dropped into still water. Luca was at the table eating his oatmeal, and Mira reached over and adjusted his napkin without looking away from the map. We don't know that, she said. But the way she said it, mechanical, almost rote, told me she'd already accepted it. The third text arrived at 7:12 a.m. Final advisory. Containment has failed in your zone. Do not open doors to unknown individuals. Do not attempt to reach hospitals. If a member of your household exhibits symptoms, isolate immediately. This is not a test. Danny stood up. We need to secure this house. Mira nodded. No argument. No spreadsheet this time. We spent the next 2 hours turning her home into something defensible. Danny brought in the bin from my trunk, and I saw what was inside for the first time. A short-barrel shotgun, a .22 rifle, 4 boxes of ammunition, a first aid kit that looked military grade, zip ties, duct tape, a battery-powered lantern, and a folded tarp. He'd packed it like a man who'd rehearsed this in his head 1,000 times. I boarded the downstairs windows using shelving planks from Mira's garage. Danny reinforced the front and back doors with screws and brackets. Mira filled every container she owned, pots, pitchers, the bathtub with water, then inventoried the pantry. She had enough food for maybe 6 days if we rationed. Luca watched all of this with the quiet, wide-eyed attention of a child who knows something is wrong, but hasn't been given the language for it yet. Are we camping inside? He asked me. Something like that, I said. Is it because of the sick people? I looked at Mira. She was reorganizing canned goods and didn't look back. Yeah, buddy. Some people are sick, and we're going to stay safe inside for a while. Okay, he said. Then, can I bring my dinosaurs downstairs? Absolutely. By noon, the power was still on, but the internet was slowing. Pages loaded in fragments, Streams buffered into silence. The local news station was cycling the same segment every 15 minutes, a reporter standing outside Franklin General Hospital, visibly unnerved, describing a surge in emergency room admissions involving patients with severe neurological symptoms. Behind her, through the glass doors, you could see people in the waiting area. Some were sitting normally. Others were standing in that same wrong-angled posture I'd seen in the alley. Tilted, suspended, waiting for something I couldn't name. At 2 p.m., we lost the internet entirely. At 3 p.m., the local station went to a static test card. At 4 p.m., someone knocked on Mira's front door. It wasn't a knock exactly. It was a slow, arrhythmic pounding, like someone hitting the door with the flat of their palm without understanding the mechanics of knocking. There was no voice, no hello, no let me in. Just the impact, over and over, with uneven pauses between each strike. Danny was already at the door with the shotgun before I'd gotten off the couch. He didn't rack it, didn't want the sound to carry, but he held it at low, ready, and pressed his back against the wall beside the frame. Mira pulled Luca into the kitchen and crouched behind the island with him. I heard her whisper something to him. Calm, steady, a tone I recognized from the way our mother used to talk to us during thunderstorms. I moved to the front window. I'd left a narrow gap between two boards, enough to see the porch at an angle. The man outside was maybe 50, heavy-set, wearing a golf shirt and khaki shorts. One shoe on, one foot bare. His face was slack. Not expressionless, the muscles were active, but they weren't coordinating. His jaw moved slightly, not chewing, but cycling, like he was working through a word his mouth couldn't shape. His eyes were open. That was the worst part. They were open and wet and pointed at the door, but they weren't looking at it. They were looking through it, past it, into some interior distance that had nothing to do with us. He hit the door again. The sound was dense and flat. He's not trying to get in, I whispered to Danny. He's just hitting it. Doesn't matter what he's trying to do. We can't shoot a man for knocking. Danny's jaw tightened. That man is not knocking, Nate. We waited. The pounding continued for another 4 minutes, then stopped. I watched through the gap as the man turned that same mechanical, jerking rotation and walked off the porch and across the yard and into the street. He moved north without deviation, arms at his sides, bare foot dragging on the asphalt. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Danny lowered the shotgun. That's not a sick person. What do you mean? Sick people stumble. Sick people moan and cry and ask for help. That man was operating on something instinct, reflex, I don't know, but there was nobody home. You saw his face. I had. And Danny was right. The man hadn't looked confused. Confusion implies a mind trying and failing to organize. This was something else, a mind that had been replaced, overwritten, running a different program. Mira came out of the kitchen. Luca was still behind the island, lining up his dinosaurs in a quiet, precise row. We need rules, Mira said. Right now, no exceptions. We sat at the table and made them. No one opens a door or window without consensus. No one goes outside alone. Weapons stay loaded and positioned at 2 points in the house. Luca stays on the second floor after dark. We sleep in shifts. What about the car? Danny asked. What about it? If we have to leave, where do we go? Mira pulled the map off the wall and spread it on the table. She traced her finger along Route 9, past the edge of the county, toward the rural corridor that led to the state forest. Danny's storage unit is here, she said. If If we can get to it, we load everything into the truck and head north. The old forestry station near Ridgeline has cabins. Seasonal. Empty this time of year. That's 40 miles, I said. 40 miles of nothing. That's the point. Danny nodded. Mira folded the map. The plan existed now, even if we didn't want to use it. That night, the power went out at 9:47 p.m. The streetlights died in a wave I could see through the gap in the boards, one by one, east to west, like a breath being slowly exhaled. The house went dark except for Danny's lantern, which he set on the lowest setting, casting the room in a thin amber glow. Luca was already asleep upstairs. Mira sat beside his door with a kitchen knife across her knees, and I didn't say anything about it because there was nothing to say. Danny took first watch at the bottom of the stairs. I lay on the couch and listened to the city die. Not in an explosion, not in a scream. In a long, slow subtraction of sound engines stopping, voices thinning, the ambient electrical hum that you never notice until it's gone. What replaced it was a silence so total it had texture. I could hear my own pulse. I could hear the house breathing through its old joints. And underneath that, from somewhere outside, the sound of footsteps. Not one set, many, moving in the same direction, north, unhurried, relentless. Friday morning, we ate cold canned soup for breakfast because Mira's stove was electric and the power hadn't come back. Luca didn't complain. He sat on the floor with his bowl and spooned chicken noodle into his mouth with a concentration that made my chest hurt. Kids adapt, that's what everyone says, but adaptation and understanding are different things, and I couldn't tell which one I was watching. Danny had been at the window since before dawn. He'd widened the gap between the boards slightly against Mira's objection, and was cataloging movement on the street with the quiet focus of a man surveilling a job site. 12 since 5 a.m., he said without turning around. All heading north, same speed, same posture. None of them are interacting with each other. You think they're drawn to something? I asked. I think they don't know we're here, and I want to keep it that way. Mira was upstairs, looking through the bedroom window that faced east. She came down around 8 a.m. with a look on her face I'd only seen once before the day our mother's hospice nurse called and said it would be soon. There's smoke, she said. 3 columns, south side, big. Fires? Looks like structure fires. No one's responding. No trucks, nothing. That was the moment the city stopped being a city in my mind. Infrastructure is invisible until it vanishes: water pressure, garbage collection, emergency response, the quiet machinery of civilization that convinces you someone else is handling the problem. When you see smoke and know no one is coming, the illusion collapses. You're not in a city anymore. You're in a geography. At 10 a.m., Danny said we should leave. Today, Sai, he said. Right now, before it gets worse. We don't even know what worse looks like, I said. That's exactly why we go now. Mira was sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, holding a mug of room temperature water. She looked at Danny, then at me, then at the ceiling. Where we could hear Luca's footsteps, he was playing some private game in his room, murmuring to himself, untouched by the debate below. If we go, she said, we're committing. We can't come back for things we forgot. We can't change our minds on the highway. If the car breaks down, we're on foot with a 5-year-old. If we stay, Danny said, we run out of food in 4 days. Water in maybe 2 if the pressure drops. And those things outside, they're slow now. They're docile. That might not last. You don't know that. I know what I've seen. They're moving towards something, which means something is organizing them. And when that something finishes organizing, They're going to stop wandering and start looking. It was the most I'd heard Danny speak in a single stretch in years. His voice was steady, but there was a strain behind it, the sound of a man arguing for his life without raising his voice. I looked at Mira. What does the science say? She almost laughed. The science says I'm an adjunct biologist who teaches introductory cell theory to freshmen, Nate. I don't know what this is. Nobody does. The texts called it a containment failure. The news said neurological symptoms. Reddit was calling it a prion-related pathogen before the internet went down. None of that matters right now. What matters? Getting Luca out. That was the answer. That was always going to be the answer. Not logic, not preparation, not Danny's bin of supplies or Mira's map of police scanner calls. Just the boy upstairs, humming to himself, trusting us to keep the walls standing. Okay, I said. We go? Danny nodded once. Mira stood. We had 30 minutes to pack, and every second of those 30 minutes would matter. We left at 11:20 a.m. through the back door. Danny went first, shotgun up, scanning the alley in both directions before waving us forward. I carried Luca on my hip. Mira followed with 2 bags, one of food, one of supplies. The plan was simple. Cross the alley, cut through the neighboring lot to the side street where I'd parked my car, load up and drive. The alley was empty, but not clean. There were objects scattered on the ground that told small, finished stories. A child's sneaker, a purse with its contents spilled, a phone with a cracked screen still glowing faintly with that same gray text box. Someone had dropped it mid-stride. I stepped over it without looking down again. Luca had his arms around my neck. His grip was tight but not panicked. Mira had told him we were going on a trip, a camping trip, far away from the city, and he'd accepted it with a terrifying trust that children extend without conditions. Are the sick people outside? He whispered. Some of them. But we're going to be quiet and fast. Like spies. Exactly like spies. We reached the car. Danny loaded the bin and bags into the trunk while I strapped Luca into the back seat. Mira got in beside him. I took the driver's seat. Danny rode shotgun literally, the weapon across his knees, barrel pointed toward the door. I started the engine and pulled out slowly. The street was vacant. No, not vacant, abandoned. There's a difference. Vacant means no one was ever there. Abandoned means everyone was. And now they're not. And the evidence of their leaving is everywhere. Open doors, idling cars with no drivers, a garden hose running into a gutter, water pooling in the street. I drove north toward Route 9. The first mile was quiet. Residential blocks with closed blinds and locked doors. I saw a few faces in upper windows, living faces, watching, deciding. Some of them would leave. Some of them would wait. I couldn't judge either choice. At the intersection of Garfield and 5th, we hit the first real obstacle. 3 cars were stopped in the middle of the road, not crashed, just stopped. Doors open, engines off. One of them had a dog in the back seat, barking at nothing. Beyond the cars, on the sidewalk, 2 figures stood in that terrible stillness. A woman in a bathrobe and a teenage boy in a basketball jersey, both tilted, both silent, both facing north. Go around, Danny said. I cut the wheel left and drove up onto the curb, tires grinding over the grass strip between the sidewalk and the street. We passed within 15 feet of the woman. She didn't turn, didn't react. Up close, I could see her hands. Her fingers were curling and uncurling in a slow, rhythmic pattern, like she was kneading invisible dough. Luca saw her. I know because he pressed his face into Mira's shoulder and didn't lift it for the next 3 blocks. Route 9 was better. The highway on-ramp was clear. Most people had either fled earlier or hadn't fled at all. Danny directed me to a storage unit, a low-slung concrete building off the access road, about 6 miles outside town. The parking lot was empty. He was out of the car before I'd fully stopped, keying the padlock on Unit 14 and rolling the door up with a clatter that made me flinch. Inside, the unit was exactly as I remembered, shelves of supplies, organized with an almost obsessive precision. Danny began loading immediately. Cases of water, canned food, a propane stove, sleeping bags, a hand-crank radio that he tested once, receiving only static across every band. "Help me with this," he said, dragging a heavy plastic container from the back shelf. Inside were more medical supplies, antibiotics he'd sourced from somewhere I didn't ask about. Bandages, a suture kit, iodine, painkillers. It took us 12 minutes to transfer everything. In that time, one vehicle passed on Route 9, a pickup truck heading south toward the city, against the logic of escape. The driver didn't stop or slow down. We were back on the road by noon. The highway stretched ahead in a long, empty corridor. Mira unfolded the map and navigated from the back seat, while Luca slept against her arm, his dinosaur clutched to his chest, his breathing slow and even. For 20 minutes, we drove in silence. The landscape shifted from suburban sprawl to commercial strips to open farmland. The sky was overcast but bright, and the fields on either side of the road were vivid green and utterly empty. No tractors, no workers, no cattle. "It's too quiet," Mira said. "Quiet is good," Danny said. "Quiet means whatever happened in the city happened out here too." The roadblock was at mile marker 31. 2 military Humvees parked nose to nose across both lanes, with a line of orange cones extending into the shoulder. Behind them, a canvas-covered transport truck. No soldiers visible. I slowed to a stop about 200 yards out. Danny leaned forward, squinting. "National Guard," he said, reading the markings. "But where the hell are they?" "Maybe they pulled back," Mira said. "You don't leave vehicles." We sat idling for a full minute. Nothing moved. The Humvees were dark, engines off. The canvas on the transport truck flapped in a light wind, revealing an empty cargo bed. "I'll go look," Danny said. "No," Mira and I said simultaneously. Danny looked at me. "We can't sit here. We go around, through the field." "The car won't make it through plowed soil." "It's grass. Look, the farm road. Right there." I pointed to a narrow dirt track that branched off the highway about 50 yards back, running parallel to Route 9 before curving north through a tree line. Danny studied it. "That could dead end. It could, or it could connect to County Road 7. Mira?" She consulted the map, tracing with her finger. "It's possible. There's a network of farm roads through here. If this one connects, we bypass the blockade and rejoin Route 9 about 4 miles north. And if it doesn't connect, then we turn around and find another way." I reversed and took the farm road. It was rough but passable, 2 tire tracks worn into hard-packed earth, with tall grass brushing the undercarriage. We drove slowly. The tree line closed in on both sides, and for a few minutes we were enclosed in a green tunnel, the highway invisible behind us. Luca woke up. "Where are we?" "Shortcut," Mira said. "It's bumpy." "It is." The road opened into a clearing, a farmstead, with a white clapboard house, a red barn, and a rusted silo. The house's front door was open. Not ajar, wide open, as if someone had walked out and never considered closing it. Danny held up his hand. "Stop." I stopped. He was looking at the barn. The doors were closed, but there was a sound coming from inside, not a moan, not a knock, but a kind of rhythmic scraping. Metal on wood, repeated, mechanical. "Drive," Danny said quietly. "Don't stop, don't look." I pressed the gas. We passed the farmstead at maybe 10 miles an hour. As we did, I glanced in the rearview mirror just once, just briefly, and saw the barn doors shift. Not open, just shift. As if something inside had pressed against them and then retreated. The farm road continued north. After another mile, it merged with a gravel road that Mira confirmed was County Road 7. From there, we rejoined Route 9 north of the blockade and continued toward the state forest. The relief in the car was physical. Mira's shoulders dropped. Danny set the shotgun on the floor. Luca asked if we could listen to music, and when I told him the radio wasn't working, he started singing to himself a song from a cartoon I didn't recognize. High and sweet and utterly disconnected from everything outside the windows. That song is one of the things I remember most clearly. Not the blockade, not the barn. The song, because it was the last uncomplicated thing I heard for a very long time. We reached the turnoff to the forestry station at 2:15 p.m. The road narrowed to a single lane of cracked asphalt, winding uphill through dense pine forest. No signs of recent travel, no tire marks, no footprints. The station appeared around a bend, a cluster of 3 small cabins arranged around a gravel clearing, with a larger main building that served as the ranger office. Everything was shuttered. Seasonal closure. A chain across the driveway with a padlock Danny cut with bolt cutters from his kit. We pulled in, killed the engine, sat in the silence of the trees. "This is it," Lucas said, peering through the window. "This is it, buddy." He considered the cabins. Then, "Which one is ours?" Mira laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than an exhale. But it was real, and it was the first time any of us had laughed in 2 days. "Whichever one you pick," she said. He chose the one with the green door. The cabin was simple 2 rooms, a wood stove, a hand pump for well water that still worked, and a set of bunk beds that Luca claimed immediately. Mira and I took the second cabin, 20 feet away, while Danny settled into the ranger office, which had a wider sight line and a desk he could use as a planning surface. By evening, we'd established something that resembled a routine. Danny set a perimeter, not a physical barrier, but a mental map of sight lines, approach routes, and natural choke points created by the terrain. The cabin sat at the top of a gentle slope, backed by dense forest, with the access road as the only vehicle approach. Anyone or anything coming up that road would be visible for 100 yards before reaching us. Mira organized the food supply. Rationed carefully, we had enough for 12 days. Water was less certain the well worked, but the pump was old, and we didn't know how deep the water table sat or whether contamination was a factor. She boiled everything over the wood stove, which Danny had fired up using seasoned logs from a pile behind the ranger office. That first night at the station, I sat on the cabin steps and watched the sky. Without light pollution, the stars were overwhelming, dense and bright and indifferent. The forest around us was alive with small sounds. The ordinary commerce of animals who didn't know or care that the human world had ruptured. An owl called from somewhere above. Wind moved through the pines in long, sighing waves. Danny came out of the ranger office and sat beside me. He'd found a bottle of bourbon in the desk left by some ranger who'd planned to retrieve it in spring, and he poured 2 measures into tin cups. "Mira's reading to Luca," he said. He asked for 3 stories. He always asks for 3. She's giving him 4. We drank in silence for a while. The bourbon was cheap and warm and exactly what I needed. "You think about Elena?" Danny asked. "My ex-wife." The question came without preamble, the way Danny always asked personal things like pulling a splinter, fast and without ceremony. "Every hour," I said. "She's resourceful." "She's in Dayton." "Dayton's a big city. Big cities have infrastructure longer. Or they collapse faster." Danny didn't argue. He stared at his cup. "I keep thinking about the man on Mira's porch, the one who knocked." "What about him?" "I've been on a lot of job sites. I've seen guys get heat stroke, guys fall, guys get concussions from dropped equipment. I've seen what the body does when the brain takes a hit. This wasn't that. That man's body was working fine. His muscles, his coordination, all functional. It was everything behind his eyes that was gone. Mira would call it neurological. Mira can call it whatever she wants. I'm telling you what I saw. That man's body was occupied by something that wasn't him." I didn't respond. I didn't have a response. Instead, I thought about my daughter, Sophie. She was 12. She lived with Elena in Dayton. She had my eyes and her mother's stubbornness and a laugh that could fill a room. I'd last spoken to her Sunday night, 3 days before the first text about a school project on the solar system. She was building a model of Jupiter out of paper mache. I didn't know if she was alive. I didn't know if she'd received the texts. I didn't know if Elena had prepared or panicked or run or stayed. The not knowing was worse than any fear I'd felt since this started. Fear is specific. Not knowing is infinite. "We should try the radio again in the morning," I said. "I've been trying every hour. Nothing but static. Shortwave. If I can rig an antenna. The ranger office has some equipment. Old, but maybe functional." "Okay." Danny finished his bourbon and stood. "Get some sleep, Nate. I'll take first watch." "You took first watch last night." "I did." "Danny, I don't sleep well anyway. Never have. Might as well be useful." He went back inside. I sat on the steps for another 10 minutes, watching the dark tree line, listening for anything that shouldn't be there. I heard nothing. Just the wind. Just the owl. Just the ordinary, indifferent forest. I went inside and lay on the lower bunk and closed my eyes and thought about Sophie building Jupiter. 4 days into the forestry station, the routine had calcified into something that felt almost normal, which is exactly when things tend to break. Danny had rigged a shortwave antenna using copper wire and a length of aluminum pipe bolted to the ranger office roof. On the morning of our 5th day, he pulled in a signal faint, warped by distance and atmospheric interference, but human. A man's voice, repeating a loop. "Survivors proceed to designated assembly point at Camp Ridgeway. Military escort available. Repeat. Survivors in the northern corridor proceed to Camp Ridgeway. Assembly and evacuation in progress. Safe zone confirmed. Repeat." The message cycled every 90 seconds. Danny recorded the frequency and the content in a notebook. He'd been keeping meticulous entries of time, weather, observations, supply counts. He showed it to us at the cabin. "Camp Ridgeway is a National Guard training facility," Mira said. She'd pulled an old AAA road atlas from the ranger office. "About 60 miles northeast, mountain roads mostly." 60 miles is a full day's drive on those roads," I said. "More if they're blocked." "It's a safe zone," Danny said. "Military, organized. That's what we need." "It's a radio message on a loop," Mira said. "That doesn't mean anyone's there. It could be automated. It could have been recorded a week ago." Or it could be real. Mira looked at Danny with the particular expression she reserved for arguments she'd already decided to win. We have food for 8 more days. Water is stable. We're invisible here. Nobody's come up that road. Why would we trade certainty for a 60-mile gamble? Because 8 days isn't forever, Mira. Because winter's 3 months away, and this cabin has a wood stove and no insulation. Because we don't know if this thing is spreading or contracting or evolving, and sitting in the dark waiting for it to resolve is not a strategy. Neither is driving into something we can't verify. They looked at me. They always looked at me, not because I was the leader, but because I was the middle. Danny was action. Mira was analysis. I was the space between where decisions actually got made. We sent a scout, I said. Danny raised an eyebrow. Who? Me. I take the car. Drive to Ridgeway. If it's real, I come back and we all go. If it's not, I come back and we plan something else. You're not going alone, Mira said. Someone has to stay with Luca. The silence that followed was heavy with the thing none of us wanted to say, that any trip away from the station was a one-way risk. That 60 miles through unknown territory meant exposed roads, potential blockades, infected fuel consumption, and the possibility of mechanical failure in a place where no one was coming to help. Mira broke first. If you're going, Danny goes with you. I stay with Luca. Mira. I can use the shotgun. Danny showed me. I'm not helpless, Nate. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you the configuration. Danny looked at her for a long moment. Something passed between them, not words, not even eye contact exactly, but a kind of sibling frequency. An understanding built over 4 decades of shared history and mutual stubbornness. You barricade the cabin, Danny said. You don't open the door for anyone who isn't us. If we're not back in 48 hours, I'll manage. If we're not back in 48 hours, you take the Atlas and you head for the Canadian border. That's 200 miles north. Stick to back roads. Mira held his gaze. Come back in 48 hours. That's the plan. We left the next morning at first light. I hugged Luca on the cabin steps. He was sleepy and warm, and he wrapped his arms around my neck with the absolute, unguarded trust of a child who has never been failed by the people who love him. Bring me something, he said. Like what? A rock? A cool one? Deal. Mira stood in the doorway with the shotgun leaning against the frame. She didn't say goodbye. She just nodded once and I nodded back. And we got in the car and drove down the access road and into the trees. The mountain roads were worse than I'd expected. Not because of damage, there was surprisingly little, but because of abandonment. Fallen branches covered long stretches. Guardrails had been breached in places where vehicles had left the road. Twice we had to get out and drag debris aside to clear a path. The landscape was beautiful in a way that felt accusatory. Pine forests climbing steep hillsides, creeks running cold and clear through rocky beds. The sky a deep, clean blue that suggested the atmosphere hadn't noticed the end of civilization, and birds still sang. Wind still moved. The world was fine. It was only us. Danny navigated with the Atlas open on his knees. We spoke intermittently practical things mostly. Turn here, slow down, watch the shoulder. The kind of communication that substitutes for conversation when neither person wants to say what they're actually thinking. At mile 22, we found the first abandoned checkpoint. 2 military vehicles, a portable barrier, and a generator that had run dry. No personnel. But unlike the roadblock on Route 9, this one showed signs of organized departure. The vehicles were locked, the barrier was properly secured, and a laminated sign was zip-tied to a post. Checkpoint relocated. Proceed to Camp Ridgeway. Follow markers. Green reflective markers had been stapled to trees along the route, small, deliberate, spaced at regular intervals. Somebody had maintained a system here. Recently. That's a good sign, Danny said. His voice had an unfamiliar quality, something close to hope, which I hadn't heard from him in days. We followed the markers. The road climbed steadily, switchbacking through denser forest. At mile 38, we crested a ridge and saw something that made me stop the car. Below us, in a wide valley, a small town was burning. Not actively, the fires had mostly died, but smoke rose from dozens of structures, and the streets were a tangle of abandoned vehicles and scattered debris visible even from this distance. It looked like a photograph of a war zone, static, comprehensive, final. Danny studied it through a pair of binoculars he'd packed. That's Carver, he said. Population maybe 4,000, or it was. Any movement? He scanned for a long time. Some in the town center. They're clustered around something, a building maybe. Hard to tell. Dozens of them, standing still. Standing still? Just standing, like they're waiting. I pulled away from the overlook and kept driving. The green markers continued. Whatever had happened in Carver, the route to Ridgeway bypassed it. Someone had planned that. At mile 51, we hit a stretch of road that had been deliberately cleared, trees cut, debris pushed aside, gravel laid over a washed-out section. This was active maintenance. This was people. At mile 57, we heard the helicopter. It came from the northeast, a Black Hawk, moving fast and low over the tree line. Danny grabbed the binoculars again. Military markings, active flight. Nate, that's a manned aircraft. The helicopter passed overhead and disappeared to the south. Its rotor wash shook the trees for 10 seconds after it was gone. We looked at each other. Danny's expression was the closest thing to relief I'd seen on a human face in a week. 3 miles later, the road widened and we saw the first fence, a 12-foot chain-link barrier topped with concertina wire, stretching into the trees on both sides. A gate, a guard tower, and standing at the gate, 2 soldiers in full kit, weapons at rest, watching our approach. I slowed to a stop. One soldier raised a hand palm out, the universal gesture for halt. The other approached the driver's side with a flashlight, even though it was midday. He shone it in my face, then Danny's, then into the back seat. "How many in your party?" he asked. His voice was young but controlled. "2 here. 3 more at a forestry station about 60 miles southwest." "Are any of you symptomatic?" "No." "Have you had physical contact with any symptomatic individuals?" "No." He studied us for a moment. Then he stepped back and spoke into a radio clipped to his shoulder. There was a pause, a crackle, a response I couldn't hear. "Pull forward," he said. "Park in the lot to the left. You'll be processed through intake. Welcome to Ridgeway." Camp Ridgeway was not what I expected. I'd imagined a military staging area, tents, portable lights, the grim efficiency of crisis response. What I found was something more permanent and more fragile. The guard facility had been expanded with civilian infrastructure, RVs, trailers, a cluster of prefab shelters, solar panels on the rooftops, a water treatment unit humming near the north fence, a medical tent, a mess hall, and people, hundreds of them, sitting in clusters, walking between buildings, waiting in lines, living. Danny and I were processed through intake, a medical screening that involved temperature checks, pupil response tests, and a series of questions about our exposure history. A medic named Hernandez, a compact woman with steady hands and exhausted eyes, drew our blood and told us we'd be in a holding area for 6 hours while the samples were analyzed. For what? I asked. Markers, she said. We don't have a full understanding of the pathogen yet, but we can identify early indicators in the bloodstream. Protein anomalies. Inflammatory markers that precede the neurological symptoms. And if we test positive? She looked at me with the practiced compassion of someone who'd answered that question many times. We'll cross that bridge. We waited in a tent with cots and bottled water and a handful of other new arrivals, a couple from Garland, an elderly man who hadn't spoken since he arrived, and a young woman named Tessa who told us she'd walked 19 miles to reach the camp after her car ran out of gas on Highway 12. I saw them in the fields, she said. She was sitting cross-legged on a cot, picking at a granola bar without eating it. Her voice was steady in the way that voices become when a person has processed something beyond the reach of hysteria. Hundreds of them, standing in rows, not moving, not making sound, just standing in the corn like scarecrows. Rows, Danny said, evenly spaced, like they'd arranged themselves, or something had arranged them. She looked at her granola bar as if she'd forgotten it existed. What's organizing them? Nobody answered. 6 hours later, Hernandez returned. Clear, she said, handing us each a green wristband. You're free to move into the general population area. The intake officer will assign you housing. I need to go back, I said immediately. My sister and nephew are at a forestry station southwest of here. I told them 48 hours. Hernandez paused. You'd need to talk to Major Reeves. He handles external operations. Major Reeves was a man in his 50s, with a shaved head and the posture of someone who'd spent 30 years making decisions that cost things. He met us in the command building, a cinder block structure with maps on every wall, marked with symbols and color-coded zones I didn't fully understand. Your family's location, he said, tapping the map. Show me. I pointed. He studied it. That's inside the Amber Zone. Not overrun, but not secured. The roads between here and there are unpredictable. We lost a convoy last week on a route that was clear 2 days prior. I'm not asking for a convoy. I'm asking to take my car. If you leave, you might not get back in. The gate protocols change based on threat assessment. I can't guarantee re-entry. Danny stepped forward. What if we bring them here? Same route we came in? Reeves considered this. If you can make the round trip in under 36 hours and everyone passes screening, I'll authorize re-entry. But I need to be clear, if anyone in your party shows symptoms at the gate, they won't be admitted. There are no exceptions. Understood? There's something else, Reeves said. He turned to the map and pointed to a zone south of our route, marked in red. The infected are migrating. We don't know why, but they're moving in coordinated groups north, primarily. They've been bypassing isolated structures and targeting population centers. Whatever's driving them, it's accelerating. How long before they reach this area? Danny asked. Best estimate? 2 weeks, maybe less. We're planning relocation to a secondary site farther north, if your family isn't here by then. I can't guarantee this camp will be. The clock had started again. Different numbers, same pressure. We left Ridgeway at dawn with a full tank. Fuel was rationed, but Reeves authorized a fill given the mission and a handheld radio tuned to the camp's frequency. Danny drove. I navigated. Neither of us slept much the night before, but the urgency was a better stimulant than any coffee. The green markers were still in place. The road was, as we'd left it, empty, maintained, passable. But the feeling was different. Coming in, we'd been driving toward possibility. Going back, we were driving against time, and the landscape felt compressed, every mile harder earned. At mile 30, we passed the overlook above Carver. Danny slowed without my asking. I looked down at the valley. The infected were gone. The town was still a ruin of smoke-stained buildings and scattered vehicles, but the clusters Danny had seen the day before had vanished. Where they'd stood, the ground was marked with dark patches that could have been anything. I didn't speculate. They moved, Danny said. North? Where else? We drove faster after that. At mile 44, we encountered something new, a vehicle on the road. A blue sedan, parked diagonally across the right lane. Its doors were open. The engine was off. On the passenger seat, visible through the open door, a child's car seat. Empty. Danny stopped. We both looked at the car for a long moment. There was no sound, no movement, no blood, no damage, no sign of violence. Just an abandoned car with an empty car seat, and the story it told without telling it. Keep moving, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. Danny pulled around the sedan and accelerated. I didn't look back. We reached the forestry station access road at 1:40 p.m. 26 hours into our 48-hour window. I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly as the road narrowed and the familiar pines closed in. Danny killed the headlights and slowed to a crawl for the final quarter mile. Approaching quietly by instinct, the chain was still across the driveway. Mira's doing. She'd reattached it after we left. I got out and cut it again, and we pulled into the clearing. The cabins were quiet. The green door on Luca's cabin was closed. No smoke from the stove, no movement in the windows. Danny was out of the car with a shotgun before I'd turned off the engine. He moved to the cabin and knocked 3 short, 2 long. A pattern we'd established before leaving. Silence. He knocked again. 3 short, 2 long. The lock turned. The door opened. Mira stood there with the shotgun in one hand and Luca behind her legs. And the expression on her face when she saw us was something I will carry for the rest of my life. It wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was the look of a woman who had spent 30 hours alone with her child in the woods, listening to every sound, imagining every outcome, and who had only just now learned that the worst one hadn't happened. "You're early," she said. "We're motivated," Danny said. Luca pushed past her legs and ran to me. I picked him up and held him, and he pressed something into my hand, a small, smooth stone he'd found near the well pump. "I got you a rock in case you forgot mine," he said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a piece of quartz I'd picked up at the Ridgeway gate. Pink and jagged and ordinary. "I didn't forget," I said. We exchanged rocks. He studied the quartz with the intensity of a jeweler, then put it in his pocket and declared it the best rock he'd ever seen. Mira listened as we explained Ridgeway, the camp, the screening, the timeline. She asked precise questions. How many people? What's the medical capacity? Is there education for children? What's the relocation plan? "It's real," I said. "It's organized, and it's temporary. Reeves says they're moving north within 2 weeks. If we're not there, we miss the window." Mira looked at the cabin, at the trees, at the sky. She'd built something here in 5 days, a fragile, functional safety that required nothing but isolation. Leaving it meant trusting strangers, trusting systems, trusting a future someone else was designing. "Pack up," she said. "We leave in an hour." We loaded the car methodically. Mira was faster than Danny this time. She'd already pre-packed most of the supplies while we were gone, stacking them by the door in order of priority. She'd known we'd be leaving. She'd just needed us to come back and confirm it. The drive to Ridgeway took longer on the return. Mira insisted on slower speeds for Luca's comfort, and we stopped twice for him to stretch his legs at points Danny deemed defensible. During the second stop, at a rest area overlooking a pine valley, Luca found a caterpillar on a fence post and spent 10 minutes watching it move. "Where's it going?" he asked. "Wherever caterpillars go," Mira said. "Is it scared?" "I don't think caterpillars get scared." He thought about this. "I think they do. I think they just don't show it." Mira caught my eye over his head. Neither of us spoke. We reached the Ridgeway gate at dusk. Different soldiers this time, but the same protocol. The flashlight, the questions, the inspection. Mira answered calmly. Luca waved at the soldier, who, to his credit, waved back. They took us to the intake tent. Hernandez was there again, running the same battery of tests. Blood draw, temperature, pupil response. Mira held Luca's hand while the needle went in. He didn't cry. He watched the vial fill with a kind of scientific fascination that made Hernandez smile for the first time since I'd met her. "Brave kid," she said. "He gets it from his mother," I said. Mira squeezed his hand. "He gets it from himself." 6 hours in holding. Luca slept on a cot with his head in Mira's lap and his dinosaur under one arm, and the quartz rock under the other. Danny sat by the tent flap and watched the camp with that unblinking attentiveness that I'd come to understand wasn't paranoia, it was care. It was the only way he knew how to love people, by watching for what might hurt them. Hernandez came back, green wristbands, clear. They assigned us a trailer, small, clean, shared with one other family, a couple named Jim and Patricia Okafor, who had driven in from the coast with their teenage daughter, Adaizi. Jim was a civil engineer. Patricia was a nurse. They'd been at Ridgeway for 9 days and had already integrated into the camp's operational structure, Jim on infrastructure, Patricia in the medical tent. "It's not perfect," Patricia told Mira as they made up the bunks. "The food is monotonous and the showers are lukewarm and everyone's scared. But it works. People are making it work." That night, after Luca was asleep and Danny was on a volunteer perimeter patrol, and Mira was reading by lantern light, I stepped outside and stood in the cool mountain air and looked south. Somewhere out there, beyond the fences and the trees and the miles of empty road, the infected were moving, organizing, converging on something or being drawn by something. And the why of it was still unknown, still terrifying in its blankness. And farther south, past all of that, Dayton. Sophie. The life I'd had before the texts, the life that existed now only as a question mark. I took out my phone. It was dead, had been for days, but I held it anyway. The weight of it. The memory of it, buzzing at 4:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. The gray box, the black text, the message that was not a test. I'd believed for a long time that survival was about what you kept: supplies, skills, plans. But standing there in the dark, listening to the camp breathe around me, I understood that survival was about what you were willing to carry. Not in a bag, in your chest. The weight of the people you couldn't reach. The decisions you'd made and the ones you'd been spared. The knowledge that the world had changed and that you'd changed inside it, quietly and permanently, in ways you wouldn't fully understand until much later, if ever. I put the phone back in my pocket, went inside, lay down on the bunk and listened to Luca breathing. Tomorrow, they'd begin planning the relocation north. Tomorrow, there would be new decisions, new risks, new miles of road. But tonight, everyone I could protect was under one roof. And that was enough. Not safety, not peace, but enough. I still have both rocks, the quartz I found at the gate and the smooth gray one Luca gave me at the cabin. I keep them in my jacket pocket, and sometimes I reach in and feel their weight and think about the exchange, the seriousness with which a 5-year-old handed me a stone and expected one in return, as if the world still operated on simple, fair trades. Maybe it does. Maybe that's the only economy that survived. I don't know what's south of us now. The radio signals from the city stopped weeks ago. The military personnel don't share much, and what they share contradicts itself. The infected are still moving. The pattern is still unclear. The why is still a silence where an answer should be. But we're north. Mira teaches Luca his letters in a room with a wood stove. Danny walks the perimeter every morning with a thermos and a rifle and the steady, watchful patience of a man who has finally found a use for his sleeplessness. And I count inventory different warehouse. Same skill, because it turns out the apocalypse still needs someone who can track what's on the shelves. Some nights, I stand outside and look south and think about Sophie. I don't pray, because I don't know who I'd be praying to. But I hold the thought of her building Jupiter out of paper mache, concentrating, getting glue on her fingers, and I let it sit in my chest where fear used to be. It's not hope exactly. It's something quieter than hope. A refusal to let the unknown become the final. 72 hours. That's all it took. 3 days between the first message and the moment we locked the door and drove north and became whoever we are now. The text said it was not a test. It was.